continue for the state.
All right, I think we have, I'm going to put what is marked as Exhibit 105 on the overhead. If you could, why don't you get yourself reoriented, let us know what that is.
This is marker 37, and the area I'm circling is an earring.
And just to get us back to where we were, this is that middle, this is the actual ditch. To the left, we had all those personal belongings. To the right, we had some other items. But this is in the ditch, more toward the south end of the ditch.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. I hand you a bag. If you could open that bag and tell us what's inside.
This is the earring that is in the picture. That is marker number 37.
What's been marked as Exhibit 106 up on the overhead as well. Is that a, what is that?
That is a close-up of the earring in marker number 37.
Okay. You could have this bag marked as exhibit, or this earring marked as the next numbered exhibit. I can't.
Exhibit 130. Is that right here?
Yes, sir.
You can just hold that up there for a minute. And we'll, oh, go ahead and show it to Jerry, if you don't mind. Now, when we were talking about the overview of this scene, crime scene, you indicated that there were some remains, some human remains also among all these personal possessions. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. We're going to put what is been marked Exhibit 107 on the overhead. This one's kind of tough to see. But we're in the ditch here still, correct?
Yes, that is correct. And I believe it is somewhere in this area there is a tooth.
Okay. Let's move to the next, which would be number 108. Is that the same, it looks like the same placard?
I can't tell if that's 32 or, hold on, let me check, or 30.
The photograph, and you can see it a little better on that one.
Yes, sir, this is 32,
Okay.
just a little bit farther away, showing it in the ditch.
And it looks, put it back up there, like a pretty deep ditch in that area at least, is that correct?
Yes, sir, this area, I would say is several feet deep.
Okay. Now, when you and your team found actual remains or items that you thought were remains, what did you do with those?
Well, we photographed them,
Okay.
and we packaged them into brown paper bags, and then I personally turned those over and signed those over to Special Agent Brent Booth.
Okay. And to your knowledge, were they then taken to the West Tennessee Forensic Center in Memphis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We can have Exhibit 109 on the overhead. What is that?
This is teeth. There's one here, and there is one here. We marked those as one marker because they were so closely together. So that's two teeth at mark.
Given to Brent Booth, where they were taken to Memphis. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir.
Okay. You have the next exhibit, Program 110. for Exhibit 110? Agent Hodge, what are we looking at here?
This is a tooth that is marker number 30 that is also in the ditch.
Okay. Also delivered to West Tennessee Forensic Center through Special Agent Bobo.
That's correct.
Now, as we're looking at these teeth, we're going further and further down that ditch, is that correct?
Yes, the markers that we just previously looked at were at the southern portion of the ditch, the upper portion. And as we're going through these markers, we're going downhill in the ditch.
Exhibit 111. That's what we're looking at here.
This would be a bone, what was described as a rib.
Okay. That was also delivered to Memphis, West Tennessee Forensic Lab.
Yes, sir.
112.
Marker number 25 is a hoop earring.
Okay.
And it is, I'm circling it right here.
It's kind of tough to see. I don't know if
There's the silver portion, and then it's coming around like that.
Okay. Agent Hodge, I'm going to hand you another brown bag if you could take a look at the contents of that. That's also there.
This is the hoop earring that is shown in the picture as marker 25.
Okay. And if we could have that marked as the next time we do it.
131.
Hey, Hans, if you could, we're looking at some really small things here and teeth and things like that. How did you guys find those things? If you could describe for the jury how you and your team managed to unearth all these items.
Some of the items, such as the bones, we would just see. Most of the smaller things, the teeth, was the second day we concentrated in the ditch area by scooping the dirt out one shovel at a time, small shovels, and putting them in 5-gallon buckets. And we had sifters, and we would sift through the dirt. But basically, we were uncovering the small things, such as the teeth, one scoop of dirt at a time.
If you could publish that hoop earring that we were just talking about. Now we're going to put what has been marked as Exhibit 113. If you could tell us what we're looking at here.
Marker number 27 is a pink fiber with a label. And marker number 9 is a rib. And I'm not sure if I can pick it out. I'm not sure exactly on marker number 9 where it is, but it is somewhere in this area close to marker number 9.
I'm going to hand it to you and see if you know. C and see if you can
Okay.
find it with a closer inspection.
Yes, I do see it now.
Okay. I'll put it back on.
Okay.
Can you find it when I put it back on?
Yes, sir. This is the rib right here,
Okay.
the bone.
That's right near that pink fiber that we've already seen some of. Is that correct?
This is a different pink fiber.
Okay.
The pink fiber we had earlier was different than that was really a piece of fabric. This is literally a fiber, a string, a pink string with a small label attached.
Yeah. What marker? And that is marker number 9.
Number 9 is the rib.
27. I'm going to hand you a bag, and if you could tell us what's in that bag.
Inside is the pink fiber with the label.
Okay. That appears to be a label or a tag for
Yes, sir, that's a
Garment.
tag that says Anvil, I believe, on it.
Okay.
ANVIL.
Okay. Yeah, if we could have that marked as the next number of the exhibit.
132. What did you call the pink
Pink fibers.
fibers?
Yes, sir.
With a tag.
With a tag. Yes, sir.
Right here.
Yes, sir, it is.
If you could show that to the exhibit. I'm going to put exhibit 115 on the overhead, and you can tell us what that is.
Sorry. Marker number 26 is a tooth.
I'm going to put the chart back up there so we can kind of have an idea of where we are now as far as in the ditch. That was marker 26, and you indicated there was a tooth.
Yes, sir. Marker 26 is located right here.
So we're about halfway, or a third of the way down, roughly.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, that tooth we just talked about was also delivered to the West Tennessee Forensic Center, correct? And
Yes, sir.
Put the photograph, or item 116, exhibit 116 on the overhead for you. If you can see what that is.
Marker number 7 and marker number 8 are each a rib.
Okay. Can you tell where they are? From that photograph?
Not from this angle and on the screen.
I'm going to hand you this photograph and see if you can find them by looking a little more close to that.
Yes, I've got it.
Actually, we do have something. We have a closer one.
Okay.
That's exhibit 117.
Yes, number 7 is right here, the rib in number 7.
That's number 7.
Yes, sir.
And we'll put exhibit 118. Both of those ribs, you also, same process where you took those, you gave them to Special Agent Booth, who then delivered them to the West Tennessee Forensic Center.
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is exhibit 118. What are we looking at at here?
This is another rib, marker 38, here.
It was also taken to the West Tennessee Forensic Center.
Yes, sir.
Put exhibit 119 on the overhead.
This marker number 6 is a tooth.
Okay. Also delivered to the West Tennessee Forensic Center.
Yes, sir.
Exhibit 120. Can you see what that is?
I see marker number 6, which was the tooth that we just had up there, a close-up, so
Okay.
it's right in this
I
area.
think we got those reversed. Okay. And that's where that's a broader view of where the tooth was found.
Yes, that's just a little farther out, and there's another flag right here
Okay.
that is another marker.
Okay. We're going to put exhibit 121 on the overhead now.
And number 5 is a rib.
Where are we in the ditch now?
We are down the ditch almost all the way to the flat area from the top, so we've moved north.
Okay. And this rib that you've described was delivered to the West Tennessee Forensic Center as well,
Yes, sir.
with the other remains. Put exhibit 122 on. Is that a wider view of
Yes, and this picture is actually, should be turned
There you go.
counterclockwise. There we go. This is at the bottom, closer to the level area at the bottom of the ditch, and this is going back up. So number 5, number 6 was above it, and so forth, from how we came down through with the markers.
Okay. And I'm going to put the chart back up so you can kind of show us with your graph where we are now.
The previous picture of number 5 was taken standing down in this area, taking the picture up this way, back up the ditch.
Okay. So now exhibit 123.
This picture is at the bottom of the ditch. The ditch is coming along through here, and this is toward the bottom where it starts to level out.
Okay. Now we have a better close-up view of that, and this is exhibit 124. You can tell us what we're looking at when this one gets up there.
And marker number 12 are 2 ribs.
Those 2 ribs were also delivered to the West Tennessee Forensic Center in Memphis.
Yes, sir.
Okay. We have exhibit 125. What are we looking at here?
This is at the bottom of the ditch in the leveled out area, and that's marker number 28.
Is that the last item that you found?
Yes, sir, in that ditch.
Did you guys go and we have a closer view of that item you found there, but did you guys go further? How far out did you go, if you can remember, as far as the entire crime scene?
From the ditch, on either side of the ditch, we probably went approximately 20 yards. And then on the north, where it levels out, this area here, we went approximately another 20, 25 yards, and the same in most all directions from the ditch.
And this was the last item that you were able to find in this direction?
Yes, sir.
Fair to say. We're going to put up exhibit 126. Is that a closer view of that last item in the ditch?
Yes, it is.
What is that?
That is a lotion bottle.
We have one other photograph. It's 128, I think. Exhibit 128. Is that the lotion?
No, it's 127, I think.
Sorry.
The black hair tie was 128.
Okay. Yeah, this is Exhibit 127. And what is that?
This is the lotion bottle that was at marker 28.
You guys tagged this lotion bottle as well?
Yes, sir, we did.
I'm going to pass forward a bag and you can look in there and tell us what's in it.
It is the lotion bottle that is in the photograph that was marker number 28.
Okay. I think we have that number as the next. Enter it in.
133.
If you could show that to the jury. Thank you, Agent Hodge. If you go back to the chart, which has been marked for the record as 81. So now we've looked at everything that you found within that ditch and at the bottom of the ditch, correct?
That is correct.
We've looked at all of the items that you found on the west side of the bank of the ditch on the west side, correct?
That's correct.
There are also, it looks like a number of things that are eastern side of the ditch.
Yes,
Okay. A number of things were found there, is that right?
that is correct, yes.
Also, it looks like a variety of things. I see some yellow and, well, some different colors over there. So you found some remains over there?
Are you talking about this area
Yes.
here?
Yeah.
This is the area that I spoke of earlier that had already been taped off when we arrived on the scene in September the 9th, 2014. There weren't any items in here, but the markers were left to where those items were.
Okay. And you're aware of the items that were found there?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to hand you 17 photos. And if you will look through those, let us know if you recognize those items, those photographs.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the witness testifying about something that's not based on her personal knowledge.
Judge, we talked about this. I talked with him about it.
I guess I didn't understand, Your Honor, about the fact that it's not based on her personal knowledge.
Well, she's indicated she has personal knowledge of the items. I spoke with defense counsel about these photographs and indicated to them that although she knows what was found
They
there.
were going to try to stipulate to speed things up.
Right.
If this is something that she can testify she knows where it was, is this,
As long as they lay a foundation that she knows where these things are, Your Honor, I just want to be clear about that. If they can lay a foundation that she knows where they are, that's fine. But if it's just some kind of guessing,
well, what I'm saying is, can we get this through one witness rather than calling multiple others that would accomplish the same purpose?
I just want to make sure the information she's going to give is accurate. So if
Well,
they can-
certainly, I understand that.
Okay, so if they can lay a foundation of how she would know this information to be accurate, then that's fine.
Okay.
I just, apparently I misunderstood earlier when we were discussing.
Well, from day one, I've tried to encourage the parties to stipulate or do things that might expedite knowing the length of time this trial could have taken. And I've not just done it over here, I've done it both sides, okay?
Special Agent Hodge, you were one of the leaders out there on this crime scene, correct?
That is correct.
You've personally viewed almost every item out there, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
Do you have personal knowledge of, and you've indicated that there are several items, and there were remains that were moved to the West Tennessee Forensic Center prior to your arrival, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
The placards for those items were still there, is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Were you provided knowledge of where the placards are?
Yes,
The items
sir.
that were where they are.
Yes,
Is
sir,
that
I
correct?
was.
And you've reviewed photographs of all of those items several times before, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I have.
And those photographs that you have up there, are they the photographs, and do they depict many of those items that were already taken to the West Tennessee Forensic Center?
I'm not quite through the photos yet, if I may.
And while you're looking, there were a number of other agents that were there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Brent Booth, we've mentioned his name several times, he was one of them,
Yes, sir.
correct?
And yes, these are the photographs that depict what was in the area.
And this is the area that we are, I keep calling the eastern side, but
This area
Okay.
here that was marked off prior to our arrival.
okay.
I'm satisfied, Your Honor, if the placards were still there when she got there, and there's pictures that match placards of
Thank
items
you,
that
thank you.
Yeah, if we could have these entered as the next.
See, 134 through 150, I believe. Give her a few moments to tag her.
Before we put those on, can you describe sort of what the lay of the land was here, where we found these, where you found these items relative to the other items that you found?
You talking about the items here, the
Yes.
markers?
Correct.
Okay, they were uphill from this ditch. So this is one of the hills that was going up, and just like this hill was going up where the ditch met in the middle. So this area was uphill from the ditch and what we found in the ditch.
Did you notice anything about some of the items that were found in this area that might give you clues to how they got there?
I didn't see the items.
Well,
There
were some personal belongings found up there as well.
Oh, yes, sir, yes, yes. The things that were found uphill from this area had teeth marks from animals that had chewed on the items or carried them or whatever, but there were teeth marks.
Did you and your team find any kind of animals or evidence of animals living up in this area where these items are found?
We did. We saw coyote dens, a larger one and a smaller one that were, at the end of the second day, a backhoe was brought in and we excavated those coyote dens to see if there were any more remains or personal effects in those dens.
Okay. And so to summarize, this is raised up significantly from this?
Yes, this is
From the dip?
uphill, and then it starts to kind of slightly go back downhill once you get up here to where marker number 31 is.
Okay. We're going to put what has been marked as Exhibit 134 on the overhead. And if you could tell us what this appears to be.
This is a bone that was found in the area that was marked off prior to our arrival, that was uphill from the ditch.
Okay. And now we're going to put Exhibit 135 on the overhead. If you could tell us what we're looking at here.
This is another bone that was in the area that was marked off prior to our arrival, that was uphill from the ditch.
Now we're going to put Exhibit 136 on the overhead. Kind of just give a better maybe overview of what we're looking at.
Yes, where this picture was taken, to the back of the individual taking this photograph was the ditch. So this is showing the uphill area to the taped off portion that was taped off prior to our arrival.
And I can see is that crime scene tape up the top, I guess at the top of that hill there?
Yes, there was actually two areas taped off. There was one larger area and then another area inside that you can see on my drawing.
Okay.
But yes, that's what that is.
Now, we've already talked about, you found that there were a number of remains found in this area, correct?
That is correct.
And were all of those items, to your knowledge, tagged and brought to the West Tennessee Forensic Center by Special Agent Brent Booth?
I don't know who took them to the forensic center, but I do understand they were taken to the forensic center with all the other remains we had found.
Okay. We're going to put Exhibit 137. If you can tell us what we're looking at here.
This is a bone that was also found in the area that was taped off prior to our arrival.
Okay. We're going to put Exhibit 138. And is that what is that we're looking at?
That's a close-up of a bone that was found in that taped off area prior to our arrival.
Okay. Exhibit 139. What are we looking at here?
This is the skull that was found in the taped off area uphill from the ditch prior to our arrival.
Okay. Exhibit 140.
And again, this is the skull that was located in the taped off area prior to our arrival.
Exhibit 141.
This is standing inside the taped off area, showing marker 17, and I believe that is 18.
Okay. Now, what is we know that marker 17 is the skull. Can you tell what marker 18 is from there or from your chart?
No, sir, I can't.
Okay. Exhibit 142. What are we looking at here?
And this is a close-up of marker 18. It is a bone that was in that taped off area prior to our arrival.
Does that appear to be a lower jaw?
It does, yes, sir.
Exhibit 143. Is that a close-up of what we've just seen?
Yes, this is the close-up of the previous picture, marker 18.
Okay. 144. Can you see what that is?
No, sir, I'm not sure that I have that.
And you to a little bit closer.
It appears to be a piece of plastic.
Plastic.
Yes, sir.
Basically, everything you guys found out there, you tagged in case it might become relevant.
Yes, sir, we did.
So if you could point to the, I can see everything now. It's
Yes, it's right here.
with a piece of plastic up in that area.
Yes, sir, in the area that was marked off prior to our arrival.
Go to exhibit 145.
I'm not sure I can tell from the picture.
I'll hand this to you. Closer look.
Oh, yes, now I can see it. Yes.
Okay. What does that look like
The-
at least?
I'll let you put it. It is some cloth material that was marked in that area but had been removed prior to our arrival.
Okay. Now, exhibit 146. What is that?
This is a wallet.
Okay. Did you guys, that was still there when you were there, correct? The wallet?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What'd you do with the wallet? Did you take a look at it?
Yes, sir, we did.
All right. I'm going to put up what marked as exhibit 147. And you guys, your team opened up the wallet, correct?
Yes, sir, we did.
And is that it?
Yes, sir, it is.
148. That's a close-up of the of what?
That is a close-up of Holly Bobo's driver's license.
Okay. And that was found in this area that we've been describing, where the skull was found, where other human remains were found, correct?
Yes, it was not in the area that was taped off prior to our arrival. It was on up the hill from that area. It was farthest from the ditch.
Hand you what has previously been marked as Exhibit 34. If you could take a look at that. Is that the wallet with the identification we've been looking at?
Yes, sir, this is the wallet that contained the driver's license of Holly Bobo.
Okay. Are there indications on that wallet that may have been some animals that dragged it up or chewed on it or something like that?
Yes, sir, there is.
Okay. If you could, if you could publish that to the jury or just give them a look at it.
Are you going to make an exhibit?
Oh, it's already been an exhibit, Your Honor. It was already marked as Exhibit 34
Okay.
through Ms. Bobo.
You might alert me. If I get my numbers up, I'll never get
Sorry.
it back.
I'm going to put the chart back on Exhibit 81. If you can kind of show us where, we just looked at Holly's wallet and identification. Now, if you can show us where that is relative to everything else.
Marker number 31, right here.
Okay. And that's one of the furthest items, if not the item that's farthest out, at least to the, was that the east, I guess? Is that
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. Was that where the den was over there somewhere?
One of the dens, yes,
Okay.
was not far from that.
Okay. All right, we're going to put up what is marked as Exhibit 149. It's a little bit of a faraway shot, but can you tell what that is?
That is the bottom portion of a black flip-flop, the sole portion.
Okay. I'm going to put Exhibit 150 up. It's still pretty dark.
This is the flip-flop here, the sole of it.
Okay. Is there some damage to that?
Yes, sir, it's damaged too.
I'm going to hand you a bag. You can look at that bag and tell us what's in it.
Inside is the sole of the black flip-flop that is marker number 33 in the picture above.
Yeah, if we could have that.
The original evidence 151.
Yeah, just publish that to the jury. Before I get to the last things here, we're almost finished. A couple things that I omitted from earlier. I'm going to hand you a bag. And if you could take a look at that and tell us what that is.
This is the thumb drive that was from the smaller plastic purse that also had the ink pens and the highlighters in.
Okay, that's one of the things we saw at the very beginning that was on the west side of the ditch.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And if we could have that admitted as
152.
152. Just hold that up there for a second.
Okay.
I'm going to hand you another bag. And if you could describe that bag and what's in it for the jury.
This is an earring that was from the purse, which was marker number 4.
Okay. Now, is that the purse and that was the purple, the larger purple purse?
The larger purse that was cloth material.
Okay. Now, if we could have that number.
And 153.
We can publish those two items together.
The thumb drive here.
right, now if we could go back to Exhibit 81 again. We've looked at nearly everything on here, correct?
That is correct, yes.
You guys found a lot of stuff over for a fairly long period of time. How long were you out there?
We were out there for 2 full days.
And you've already indicated you had metal detectors, you had dogs, you had a backhoe. What else did you have? You were sifting through the dirt. You had anthropologists out there, a number of TBI agents out there, all working together to try to find everything you could. Correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
You went to the east, to the west, and to the north of this scene. Correct?
Yes, we did.
And this is all you were able to find.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there are a few other items. I see some blue shaded items.
Yes.
Okay. And what were those?
The blue items that you see here were cartridge cases and a shot shell case.
Okay. I'm going to hand you 3 photographs. If you could tell us if those accurately depict those casings as they were that day.
Yes, they do.
Your Honor, if we could have those
Right.
entered as the next.
Entered as exhibits 154, 155, and 156.
First one out of that is 154 for the record. And what are we looking at here?
Number 24, marker 24 is a 308 cartridge case.
308 cartridge case?
Yes, sir.
And if we could go back to exhibit 81. Where is that on this exhibit?
It is right here.
308 is right there. I'm gonna hand you, that is placard number 24, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
To the bag. Does that have, what's item number 24 in it?
Yes, this is the 308 caliber cartridge case.
Okay. You have that marked as the next number.
Is that second 308?
No, sir, it's the first and only 308 cartridge
Okay, that
case.
was what was depicted in 154?
Yes.
Okay, I got ahead of myself, okay.
Yes. It's also on this chart here, that's number 24, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So it's sort of to the right and down from where everything else was.
Yes, it's located right here.
Okay. Exhibit 155 over there on the overhead. Tell us what we're looking at here.
Marker 13 is a 380 auto caliber cartridge case.
380 auto.
Yes, sir.
If we could have 81 put back on the overhead, tell us where you found that.
13 was located right here closer to the ditch.
Okay. That's for another bag.
And this contains the 380 auto caliber cartridge case that is marker 13.
Okay. You just hang on to this for a second.
Okay.
And finally, this is 156. What we're looking at here.
This is a 410 shot shell case.
Okay. We go back to DD1 and you can tell us where this was.
23 inside the taped area that had previously been marked off prior to our arrival.
Okay. I'm going to hand you the bag, and if you can tell us what's in there.
And it is the 410 shot shell case in the bag.
Now, if you have that, this is the next number exhibit.
All right. I'm not sure I'm up. Have the 308 and the 380, have they been moved in? I don't think they have unless I missed something.
Okay. We can move those, I guess, in sequentially as the next three numbered exhibits.
All right. Let's do the 308. That was the first one she described from picture one, or from exhibit 154. That will be 157. 380, as she described it, will be 158. 410 shot shell, as she described it, will be 159.
308 is exhibit 157.
Right.
Okay.
And then 380. You're not dyslexic, are you?
No, I just got confused as to which was in this bag.
One's 308, the other one's 380.
Yes. And if you could just publish those to the jury.
Okay.
Quick.
Let me say this, it's a little muggy, we're doing all we can do. This system, I think, is under capacity. I'm glad now we didn't try this in July, so, because this is September and still they haven't set on like 63, so we're doing the best we can. It just might be me, I told you I might make sure. Are we through with that for a minute or not?
Yes, sir. We're approved.
Let's turn the lights up. It might let them view the exhibits a little better. Hold up just a second. You can walk back down when they get these lights on.
Especially Hodge, obviously, a lot of things you found out here in this area, correct? You and your team.
Yes, sir.
To your knowledge, were these things, or any of these things sent away for testing or anything like that? Or do you know?
The remains went to Memphis, as we spoke of earlier, and then the personal effects and the cartridge cases were submitted to the TBI crime laboratory.
Okay. Now, your job, though, isn't to follow up on testing or to do testing or anything like that?
I do testing on firearms evidence, but once it's submitted into the laboratory and goes to the respective units, then I don't keep up with it. No, sir.
In this particular situation, was your job more to discover, properly package, catalog, and deliver these items to where they needed to be?
Yes, sir, it was.
Okay. And did you memorialize everything that you did out there, you and your team, in a report?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I forgot one thing. These are, for the record, defense has seen these and they have a photograph of them. I'm going to show you a couple of, well, we'll do them one at a time. And it's sort of difficult to get perspective when you're in the woods, right? And,
Yep.
and trying to figure out where things are in relation to one another. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
You guys made, I'm going to show you this. So tell us what this is. You can get down there.
Okay.
Can you get down good? You
Right.
have to be careful, your hands get a little dirty when you...
This is an aerial photo of the area, the ditch and the hillside, that was a two-dimensional drawing that I had done that we've talked about previously. And the stars go with each picture showing where they were located along the ditch and up the hill.
Which one are you showing now? What's the number in the top right corner?
17, I think. Was that right?
Yes, sir. Is it fair to say that this is mostly remains in this poster?
Yes, this is remains in this poster. To get the logistics of what we're looking at, this is the ditch, and this is the southern part of the ditch, which is uphill. And this is going downhill, as you can see, to that lower point where it starts to flatten out in this area. This is the area that is up the hill from the ditch, where the skull, the mandible, and other items, bones, were found that had been removed prior to our arrival, that had the blocked off
Point again to
area.
the taped-in area, right there.
Right here, Your Honor.
Okay.
So this is uphill from the ditch, and this is the top of the ditch, the southernmost point going downward. And each picture is a star that shows their location.
If we could have that entered as the next number of the exhibit. Sure where we're at.
Let's see if I agree with you. It should be 160.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This next one I'll ask you about before we have it tagged. If you could describe what we're looking at here.
This is
Just briefly, and then we'll have it
Okay.
covered.
Okay.
This is another aerial photo and a photograph of the ditch with the markers of most of the personal effects.
This focuses more on personal effects.
Yes.
And if we could have this entered as the next number of
Be
exhibit.
161.
161. Yeah, if I could have published this, if you could describe what we're looking at here, Special Agent Hodge.
This picture is showing marker 27 and marker 25, and this is looking back up the hill. So the photograph is taken from North Point looking south up the hill. So from this point, it is up this hill in this area here where the skull and mandible and other bones were found that was blocked off earlier, taped off earlier prior to our arrival. So this is showing the personal items that were to the left on my two-dimensional drawing on the hillside. And each picture shows, is denoted with a star. And then the wallet with the driver's license was at that furthest point up the hill from this area. So it is up this way.
Judge, I have no further questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Cross-examination.
Yes.
You want any of these exhibits left up?
I want 145, please. This is a photograph.
Which is 145.
Photograph. Yes.
You see our homemade lens cover? That thing was blinding people coming in, so it's not very sophisticated, but it works.
First, Ms. Hodge, let me just ask you so I understand. You said some of the items, the teeth and other small fragments, you found by sifting the dirt.
That is correct, yes.
And I noticed you had pictures of these items, though. Did you take?
Yes.
So after you sifted the dirt and you found something, then did you set it back down on the ground by where you found it?
No, ma'am. The removal of the dirt, as I spoke of earlier, one shovel at a time, would reveal the small items like the tooth. So they were photographed as they were found in the ditch.
So you were kind of shaving away dirt, would take a photograph. You weren't placing things back. Okay,
No, ma'am.
just wanted to be clear on that. Then this other item here, you described it, and let me see if I can zoom in on this. I don't know how clear it is. There. You had described this as cloth, but it appears to be some kind of woven fabric like a bag fertilizer might come in.
Yes, that's possible.
Okay.
Yes.
It appears to be that the fabric's woven out of kind of a waxy plastic material, like a burlap, a plastic burlap. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And it's not fabric cloth.
That was the term that I used, but this was one of the items that was removed prior to our arrival, so I did not see it. I've only identified it through a photograph.
Okay. Very good. No further questions.
No redress there.
Let's go ahead and take a break. We haven't been there that long, but this is fairly tedious. It does not mean it's not important. It doesn't mean you should have any additional emphasis, but listening to one after the other, it gets a little tedious. Let's take 15 minutes, follow the instructions you were given. Come in, face me and raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Be seated. I want you to state your name for the court reporter and spell first and last, please.
Marco, M-A-R-C-O, Ross, R-O-S-S.
Okay, you proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Good afternoon. Oh, yeah, and you can use that microphone, Doctor. It's been pushed up a little bit. What do you do?
I'm a forensic pathologist and the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner at the West Tennessee Regional Forensic Center.
Okay, that's in Memphis?
That's correct.
What kind of education do you have to do to be a forensic pathologist?
Well, in my case, I graduated from Tulane Medical School in 1985, completed a residency in general surgery at the University of South Carolina in 1991, and then I served as a surgeon in the United States Navy for 4 years, and from 95 to 99 I completed a residency in anatomic and clinical pathology at the University of Vermont, and then a forensic pathology fellowship at the University of North Carolina, which I completed in 2000. From the next 2.5 years, I served as a medical examiner in Phoenix, Arizona. Then I served as a medical examiner in Spokane, Washington for approximately 4.5 years. And I've been with the Memphis office since March of 2007.
Are there any types of continuing education that you do to stay up to date and learn new?
We are required to do at least 40 hours a year, or actually every 2 years, of continuing medical education.
Do you do any teaching or write any articles or things like that?
We are involved in educational activities with the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis. We have clinical appointments there, as well as our appointments at the Forensic Center, and we have a fellowship program. We educate fellows and residents as well as medical students, and we do some poster presentations with them at national meetings.
Do you have any type, you might have already mentioned this, but do you have any type of certifications and that type of thing?
I am board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology and in forensic pathology.
How many autopsies have you performed?
Let's go ahead. Stipulate him as expert witness in his field.
We stipulate.
All right, thank you.
All right. Now, do you remember? Did you bring the report of a autopsy on a Holly Lynn Bobo?
Yes, I did.
Okay. What's the first thing you do on an autopsy like that?
Well, in a typical autopsy that involves more intact remains, we of course will do a external examination of the body, the outer surfaces, and then proceed with an internal examination, examining organs and internal structures for evidence of disease and injury. In this particular case, we had already skeletonized remains to examine.
Okay. Now, the remains here were initially examined by a different doctor, correct?
That's correct.
Was it Dr. Karen Chancellor?
Yes, she's the chief medical examiner.
And she's currently on leave, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you have her report here, is that correct?
That's correct.
Is that a report that's kept in the normal course of business by the West Tennessee Forensic Center?
Yes, it is.
And are those reports accurate?
Yes, they are.
You're not just relying off that report though to testify today, are you?
No, I actually had the opportunity to examine the remains myself.
Okay. I'm going to, defense counsel, look at these photographs. And some photographs would help you detail for the jury what you were able to find, is that correct?
Yes.
If you could look at these photographs in order and just let us know if those accurately depict the remains that you were able to examine for your testimony today.
Yes, they do.
They do? Okay, thank you. Yeah, if we could have these, I'm going to count them, but there are 12 photographs. If we could have those entered as the next.
So it'll be 165 through 176, I think. You always add the numbers and subtract one. I think it's 162. No.
It is, at 162.
Well, I can't read my writing. I thought that was 164. It's a 161 where I scratched over something. All right, thank you. So it'll be 162 through, how many did you say? How many?
I'm sorry, 12.
12. So it'll be 171. See what I did? I did 160 twice. 173. I think I'm back on number now.
We're ready, Judge. You could put exhibit 162 up for us. Let me just zoom. That's good. You can make it a little bit, bring it in a little bit, Steve. No, that's good. Doctor, are these the items that were delivered to your office from Decatur County?
Yes, they are.
If you could look at those items, there's something that's, we could focus that a little bit. Still not focused very well. There's a point, you have that in your hand already?
Yes.
There are a couple of, well, describe what we have in that photograph.
What we received for examination included the skull along with the mandible, with some teeth present in there, as well as several individual loose teeth, the left scapula or shoulder blade, and there were 6 ribs here. There's actually a 7th, which looked like a rib, but this is just a piece of wood. Was not a rib. Here's also another, just a fragment of wood that had been picked up. I think was thought to possibly be a bone fragment. If it turns out it's just a piece of wood. Down here is the manubrium, which is the upper part of the sternum, and then this here is a non-human bone that was subsequently identified by the anthropology lab as the bone of a common dog.
So I'm counting 7 actual ribs. Is that correct, Doctor? And then there's a piece of wood going from the top on the ribs. That's
Yes,
a rib?
there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ribs,
Okay.
and then the piece of wood.
And then there's a piece of wood.
This
Okay.
other here, yes.
And how do you begin your examination with remains like these?
Well, we will start by documenting, what bones are there, which bones may be present with partial remains such as this. We'll try to document specifically which bones they are, and then we start looking at overall characteristics of the bone, making an evaluation as to whether or not they give any indication of stature or age, and the characteristics of the bones themselves in terms of weathering, which may give us some idea as to how long the remains have been at the location where they were found. And then we will analyze the remains to look for any evidence of disease to the bony structures or any evidence of injury.
Okay. Now, we see a number of teeth here in the photograph, Dr. Ross. What type of a doctor, what type of a process do you go through to make an identification with teeth like that were found on the scene?
And we will usually ask for help from a forensic odontologist,
Okay.
who will then examine the dentition as well as the jaws and do comparisons of those with known records available of a suspected individual, deceased individual, to try to make an identification on that basis.
And in this case, was that done?
Yes, it was.
And was that Dr. Holland Manis?
That's correct.
And she compared the teeth that we're looking at here with some existing dental records of Holly Lynn Bobo?
Correct.
Okay. We're going to put what has been marked as Exhibit 163 on the overhead. If you could describe what we're looking at here, Doctor.
This is a photo of the back of the skull. These are normal sutures that an individual has on the back of the skull. The skull is actually made up of several different bones early in life that come together and fuse along these suture lines. And the top of the head would be towards the top part of the photograph. Here's the base of the skull down here. So the right side of the skull would be here, and here's the left side. And over on the right side of the back of the skull, there is a ovoid defect here that has internal beveling on it. What that means is that the outer edge of the bone is fairly sharply defined, but on the inside surface of the skull, the bone is beveled in an outward manner. And that's pretty typical for a gunshot entrance wound to create that pattern on the bone. In addition, there are these fracture lines that are radiating from the gunshot entrance wound site.
Could you show us again those fractures radiating from the...
Yes, there's one fracture going upward like this, and there's another fracture going downward like there.
And those would be caused by...
Those are caused by the bullet actually causing expansion of tissues inside the skull, which then push the skull outward and secondarily fracture the skull.
Is that that expansion? What causes the expansion?
As the bullet passes through the tissue, the energy of the bullet is dissipated into the surrounding tissues, and those tissues will literally expand.
Okay. And that can cause fractures in the,
Yes.
in the skull. Doug, we're going to put what has been marked as Exhibit 164 up, and if that helps you describe the injuries a little bit better.
This photograph shows also the back of the skull, although now it's taken a little bit more as though from her back right side. And you can see over here is what's called the mastoid process. That's the big bony protuberance that you can feel just behind your ear. And this again shows the bullet location a little bit more as looking straight onto the bullet hole, as opposed to looking at it on its a little bit more towards its side in the previous photograph. And again, one can see a photograph extending upward in this direction, a fracture, and another fracture extending downward in that direction.
Now, Exhibit 165.
And this view is taken more from the right side, so this is looking at the right side of the skull. And again, this here represents the gunshot entrance wound, and of course the front of the skull is towards the right. This is what remains of the upper jaw on the right side. The orbit or eye would be located just inside the bone in this area. This hole here actually represents the ear canal.
It looks like, Doctor, that the bottom part of the skull is that dirt and debris on the bottom part?
There's some dirt in this area where the skull had been resting on the ground.
So it appears to, I don't know, does it appear to have been resting that way for some time?
Yes, it did, because once some of this dirt material was cleaned off, there was some brown staining of the skull in this area, which is pretty typical when a bone has been resting in an area for a long time, whereas these other surfaces of the skull were a bit more weathered because of their exposure to the sun and the elements.
Okay. Did you measure? Do you know the circumference of the hole of the entry wound?
I believe it was approximately 9 by 11 millimeters.
Okay. If well, I'll come back to that. If we could look at the 166. What are we looking at here, Doctor?
This is another view of the right side of the skull. This one is taken even more directly right onto the right, so the bullet hole is seen here more towards the back of the skull. Of course, the more recognizable orbit and upper jaw up here. Again, this represents the opening for the ear canal. And there are some fractures, in addition to the fracture back here, there's also a fracture of this mastoid process here, which again is associated with the gunshot wound.
Are those also, is that a fracture on the right eye over here, the socket and up to the...
These are actually normal suture lines, but there is actually a fracture running right along here on the right side of the maxilla.
Could those fractures have been caused by that same bullet?
They're all consistent with this gunshot wound, yes.
Show you Dr. 167. And what are we looking at here?
This is a photograph taken showing the left side of the skull. And again, just the eye orbit here is where the ear would be located. And there are also some fractures that can be seen on this side associated with the gunshot wound. In addition, and it will be better appreciated in other views, but much of the left side of the maxilla is absent because the bullet actually exited this area of the left side of the face. So a portion of that bone is absent because of that.
Okay. So, and did you indicate that some of these fractures on the left side of the skull could also be caused by, did you already say that? I apologize.
Yes, yeah, they are consistent with being caused by the gunshot wound.
Why is that now? Can you tell from this skull the range of the wound, or if the wound were, you know, in other words, if the gun were pressed against the head or close to the head or within feet of the head?
No, based on examination of the range, I was unable to determine a range of fire.
Would these fractures be consistent with a close-up wound?
Yes, they would be.
168, Doctor, and if I can get that. And we see a metal rod going through. If you could describe it to us, what this is.
This is a photograph showing the bottom of the skull. So in this case, it's as if you're, standing underneath, looking upwards into the skull. This hole here is what's called the foramen magnum. So this is the part of the skull that sits on top of the spine, and the spinal cord goes up through there and connects to the brain. The front of the skull is up here towards the top of the picture. The back of the skull, or back of the head, would be down here towards the bottom of the picture. This is her right side, and this is her left side. The bullet, or the rod, goes through the bullet hole, the entrance wound, down here on the right back side of the skull. This defect here is an area of the skull known as the clivus. It's in the base of the skull, and it's an area right sort of next to where the brainstem would lie. And this part is missing because there's external beveling.
What do you call that?
The clivus.
You want to spell it?
C-L-I-V-U-S.
Okay.
And the defect here with the external beveling is consistent with the bullet then exiting through this portion of the base of the skull. It continued up through here, and again, a lot of the left maxilla or left upper jaw area is absent because of the gunshot wound continuing through this area, causing fractures in that region as well.
So is that track going, I guess, well, if you could describe, is it right to left?
It's
Downward?
predominantly from her back towards her front, and somewhat from her right side towards her left side, and it also had a very slight downward trajectory as well.
Okay. Is it 169? And this is you could describe what we're looking at here.
This is a view of the skull taken sort of from the back, with the skull laying on the left side. So the right side of the skull is towards the top of the picture. The left side of the skull is towards the bottom of the picture. And again, it's looking from the back towards the front. So here is the entrance wound defect with a metal rod just showing the passage of the bullet going through this area here. You can see that's the area of the clivus that the bullet exited at the base of the skull, and then continuing into the area of the left maxilla or upper jaw cheek region.
Thank you, Doctor. 170. This is a closer up shot, if you could describe what we're looking at here.
This is a more close-up view of the base of the skull, particularly showing this defect in the clivus in the base of the skull. And again, showing that this is the external beveling I was referring to, instead of the fact that you've got some bone edge here on the inside portion layer of the skull. And then the outer area, you've got this area of defect is back a little bit further. That's what's referred to as external beveling, and is consistent with a bullet passing from inside the skull out through the clivus in that direction.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, Exhibit 171.
This is another photograph, again showing the bottom of the skull, but again taken a little bit more towards the front. So again, the back of the skull is towards the bottom of the picture, the front of the skull towards the top, the orbits of the eyes easily recognized. And again, the defect in the clivus, the bullet would have exited through here and then continued through the left upper jaw and cheek region. A lot of the bone and the teeth are missing in this area because they were multiply fractured from the gunshot wound. There is an edge on the maxilla here where there is that external beveling that I mentioned before, and that again is consistent with the bullet having passed in an outward direction through that area. And the battery has gone dead in the pointer.
Second electrical failure we've had today. This one should be easily remedied.
Thank you. So again, the bullet then would exit through the base of the skull and then proceed through the area of the left upper jaw and cheek area. And again, this area here is where there's some external beveling of bone consistent with the bullet passing out through that area just underneath the left eye.
And that's going, it kind of looks like it might be going upward based on that photograph, but it's going downward, is that correct?
It's a slightly a downward trajectory. In other words, it looks upward just because the front of the skull is towards the top of the photograph. So the trajectory is from her back towards her front and from her right towards her left. The downward trajectory refers to as if you were actually looking of the skull from the side. The fact that the entrance defect on the back of the skull is a little bit higher up in the head than this defect in the cheek. So it's just ever so slightly downward because of that, the location of those defects.
I'm going to put what's been marked as Exhibit 172 on the overhead. And I don't know if this gives us a better view of the injuries to that left side of the face.
Yes, this is the front of the skull. Again, the eye orbits are easily recognized, but there are the gunshot exit wound defect is in the region of the left cheek. A lot of the bones of this cheek and upper jaw are missing, again due to the gunshot wound having passed through that area, causing multiple fractures and then probably subsequent post-mortem loss of those bone fragments.
Dr. Ross, would a wound like this, well, is this wound consistent with a .32 caliber?
Objection, Your Honor. Qualified in ballistics.
If he knows, if it's outside his area,
What 32 caliber bullet is, by my understanding, has a measurement diameter of 0.32 inches. By converting to inches the size of the defect in the back of the skull, that's about a 0.36 inch defect. So anything 0.36 or smaller could have caused that defect. So that would be consistent with a .32 caliber bullet causing that defect.
So anything larger than .36 would likely not have caused that.
Correct.
This wound that we've been describing, Doctor, would this be a fatal wound?
Yes, it would.
Did you, what is the manner of death? What does that mean, actually, the manner of death?
We,
The cause of death, I apologize.
the cause of death is a gunshot wound to the back of the head. And we certify causes of death are those disease processes, injuries, or entities that do result in death.
But it's pretty clear here to you, in your expert opinion, that the cause of death was the gunshot wound to the back of the head that exited through the left side of the front.
That's correct.
Were you able to determine a manner of death?
We classify a manner of death, in this case, as a homicide.
Doctor, I'm going to pass forward your, I think counsel has this, your report. You take a look at this and let us know if that's the autopsy report done on the remains of Hodge and Bobo.
Yes, it is.
And the report itself is actually larger because it includes the odontologist and things like that, is that correct?
The odontology and forensic anthropology report are added onto this to make it part of the full report.
Okay.
But the actual autopsy report that our office did are these pages here, correct?
Your Honor, if we could have that admitted as the next numbered exhibit.
174.
Dr. Ross, one last thing that your office did you send a rib or a portion of a rib somewhere for DNA analysis?
Yes, we did.
Okay. Do you remember when those were sent, or? If you remember, that's fine.
It was in February of 2015.
Was it actually 2 ribs that were sent?
I believe it was just one rib.
When did you say February of what?
2015.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon, Dr. Ross. My name is Jerry Gonzalez. I'm an attorney for Mr. Adams, along with the rest of the defense team. You are actually a licensed physician, right?
Correct.
So you're licensed to practice medicine in the state of Tennessee.
That is correct.
Now, as part of your pathology report, you actually relied in part on the anthropology report. Is that right?
That's correct.
In fact, in the pathology report, which is actually only 2 pages, it doesn't mention anything about the size of the internal defect, does it?
No, it does not.
So when you testified that the internal defect, and we're talking about the smaller hole in the back right of the head, that it was 9 to 11 millimeters approximately, were you doing that by memory? Were you relying on the anthropology report, or what?
Relying on the anthropology report.
Now, the anthropology report actually reports it as 12.10 by 9.24 millimeters, doesn't it?
Yes.
All right. So your 9 by 11 was just an approximation?
Based on memory of reviewing that report, I didn't remember specifically. I knew it was roughly in that range.
Understood. Do you understand the terms pre-mortem and post-mortem?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what those terms mean?
Pre-mortem means before death, and post-mortem means after death.
So an event that occurred pre-mortem means an event that occurred prior to the actual death of the individual, and post-mortem means an event that occurred after the death, right?
Correct.
And forensic pathology is essentially, in layman's terms, it's the use of scientific knowledge to answer a question, a scientific question, or a criminology question, something presented that we're going to use scientific evidence to try and resolve, right?
Correct.
When you, in the, or Dr. Chancellor in the pathology report determined that the cause of death was the gunshot wound, did you use any actual scientific tests to make that determination?
Well, the whole part of our evaluation, which is really includes part of the practice of medicine, involves looking at the overall remains of a case, the overall remains of an individual, looking at evidence of disease and injury. So in this particular case, the test, if you will, is that of an examination of the remains. So that is really our test, is the examination of those skeletal remains.
But there was nothing, there was nothing in the examination of the actual skeletal remains that actually allowed you to determine that that hole was made post-mortem or pre-mortem, was there?
Well, the one thing that leads us to believe that this is a pre-mortem wound is the presence of the secondary fractures. There actually had been some studies that were done with gunshots done on skulls, empty skulls, and in those cases the bullet holes were basically just cut out an entrance and an exit defect without fractures. Fracturing that occurs in a skull from a gunshot wound are secondary fractures that, in this study that they did, they then would put a gelatin inside the skull to sort of represent what would have been the brain inside the skull. In those cases, you did get fractures. So and of course, there have been studies looking at bullet passages through gelatin molds showing tissue expansion. So in these cases, the secondary fractures are the result of of tissue having been present inside the head when the bullet passed through. So at least we know that it wasn't an empty skull that the bullet went through. There was a skull that contained presumably a brain in this case.
Right, so we know it wasn't an empty skull, but in the study you just cited, it was a post-mortem event, was it not?
That's true.
All right, so they fill the skull with usually ballistic gelatin, right?
Yes.
And then they shoot the skull and see if any fractures occurred, and when they filled it with ballistic gelatin, the fractures did occur, but clearly they weren't shooting a living person, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so that was an example of a post-mortem event that still produced the same kind of fractures that you are saying are typical of a pre-mortem event, right?
Yes.
Okay, but we know it was post-mortem.
In that study, yes.
In the study, all right. So the critical part of the analysis that is relative to the fracturing is whether there is some kind of tissue inside the skull frame that will produce the kind of pressure that you said causes the skull to fracture, right?
Yes.
Okay. So when you receive a skull that's empty inside of any tissue or ballistic gelatin or other event, you're presuming that at the time of the shooting, there was something inside the skull, right?
Yes.
Some kind of gelatin substance, brain tissue, or ballistic gelatin, right?
Correct.
Okay. But there's no way for you to know that the skull either had or was live tissue or it was post-mortem tissue inside the skull at the time of the shooting, is there?
That's true.
Okay, so going back to my original question, there was no scientific evidence that would allow you to conclusively conclude that at the time the shot was fired into that skull that the individual was alive, is there?
That is true. There's nothing from our examination to state that that was the case.
The only thing you can definitively say is that there was tissue inside the skull at the time.
Yes.
And if an individual is shot in the head after they have already deceased, you'll get the same kind of fracturing, won't you?
That is correct.
So when the pathology report says the cause of death was the gunshot wound, it really should say presuming the individual was alive at the time.
Well, our cause of death is what we believe to be more likely than not the cause of death in this case.
And you base that on other information you've received, not necessarily scientific data.
That is correct.
Now, you testified when you were asked by the prosecution if the bullet hole would be consistent with a close-up, whether the fracture was consistent with a close-up wound. You remember that?
Yes.
But it's also true that it would be consistent with a shot fired at some unknown distance, right?
That is correct.
So again, we go back to the actual written determination in the pathology report that the range of fire is indeterminate, right?
That is correct.
We just don't know from what distance was the gun to the target, right?
Correct.
It could be close, it could be far.
Yes.
In fact, the problem with not knowing the determinate range or being able to determine the range is that as long as that bullet is causing enough pressure to cause that tissue inside the head to expand, you're going to get the fracture, right?
Correct.
So that bullet could be shot point blank, 4 feet away, across the room, and as long as there's that pressure, you're going to get that fracture, right?
That is correct.
You also testified that the bullet hole was consistent with the 32, and then you gave an opinion that the 32 measures at, what did you say, 0.36
I believe
of an inch?
0.32.
0.32 of an inch. Now that's actually a rounding figure, right?
I believe it is.
In other words, a 32 caliber bullet actually measures at 0.3125 inches. Isn't that right?
If you say so.
Does that sound right to you?
It sounds correct, yes.
And what did you say about the 0.36 or smaller?
That, based upon the anthropologist's measurement of the size of the hole, that the smallest dimension that they had in their 9-point-something millimeters, that converts into a 0.36 inches in size.
That the hole does.
That the hole is, yes. The hole is 0.36 inches in size. So that something that size or smaller could have made that defect. In other words, if a bullet were 0.37 or 0.38 or larger in size, it probably could not have made that defect. The defect should have been bigger.
Now, that presumes that the bullet at point of impact was intact, correct?
Yes.
So if the bullet had fragmented en route from the gun to the skull, if the fragment was 0.36 or smaller, it could have made that hole, couldn't it?
Yes.
So once again, you really don't know the size of the bullet that made that hole because there's so many other variables that could have affected that bullet at point of impact, right?
True.
Now, in looking at the exit wound of the skull, would the exit wound, assuming for the moment that it was made by the bullet, would that have knocked out the teeth on that side of the jaw?
Well, it would have caused a lot of fractures. It may or may not have knocked the teeth out at that time. The teeth may still have been in place, and they were just subsequently lost later on.
Okay. So it would have knocked out some amount of skull fragments that it would have been spread around or so.
Well, if the skin was intact relatively intact, save for the bullet exit wound itself, and some bullet fragments may have come out through that exit wound, but as much maxillary skull that was missing, I don't think all of that came out at the time of the shot, but probably was lost later on.
But you don't really know.
No.
Now, we all, and this is regarding your expertise as a licensed physician, and maybe you don't need to be a physician to know this, but we all kind of walk around all day and produce a certain amount of gas within our body, right?
Yes.
So as we go through the day, some way our body expels the gas to a point, but our body is always producing gas and always maintains a certain amount of gas in our bodies, regardless of our efforts to expel the gas. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So when a person dies, that gas is still in the body, right?
Yes.
And if I were to take a body that had just died and push on the belly, for example, there's no longer any muscle tissue or flaps such as the esophagus that is going to hold that gas in, because initially at least our muscles sort of relax when we die, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that gas would then be expelled.
Some gas still stays in the body even after death, and there are bacteria start breaking down tissues and actually create even more gas after you die.
And the bacteria produce more gas that stays in the body, and eventually that gas works its way out, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if I move a body with either bacterial gas or natural gas, sometimes that gas is going to be expelled.
Correct.
And it may or may not make a noise, right?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. Various studies that have tried to replicate gunshot trauma to skulls using other than skulls.
No.
You're not familiar with those studies?
No.
Okay. Are you familiar with studies that actually use live skulls, or not, excuse me, not live skulls, but deceased skulls, but they get them intact with tissue and everything?
Well, intact skulls with already tissue in them, like still a brain intact or something like that.
Brain intact, skin intact,
Yeah,
everything?
no, I'm not.
In other words, are you familiar with, maybe not now, but you used to be able to get intact heads from India or China that you could conduct scientific experiments on?
I'm not familiar with that.
Not familiar at all?
No.
Thank you.
Further?
Dr. Ross, you do a lot of work in Memphis, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with gunshot wounds.
Yes.
If someone takes a 32 caliber revolver and puts it right on the back of my head or near the back of my head, and it comes all the way through my head and comes out the left side of my face, what's that going to do to me?
It's going to cause an entrance wound on the back of the head and an exit wound on the front of the head. It will perforate the brain, and it will cause fractures.
Am I going to still be here talking to you?
I wouldn't expect you to be.
Is it going to kill me?
Yes.
This wound is consistent, is it not, with a 32 caliber revolver being at or near the back of the head?
It's consistent with it.
Nothing further.
The presumption in that hypothetical is that the person is alive, right?
Yes.
So there's no dispute that if alive, that would be a fatal shot, right?
Correct.
If you're dead, is that a fatal shot?
If you're already dead, it doesn't matter.
It's not fatal, is it?
No.
All right, thank you.
All right, step in. You're free to go, Dr. Ross. Did we get the report?
Yes, sir.
It's with the exhibit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Carl, you're next.
Yeah, we have a stipulation to read. I'm not sure how the court wants to do it. I can pass forward. It's a stipulation with respect to the odontologist and the...
Did it say what that person would have testified if called to
Yes, sir.
give testimony? I'll read it, and then we'll file it as an exhibit.
Approach.
If I can read it, let's see how technical.
I typed it so you can...
Okay, good.
It's not handwritten.
All right. Stipulation. Come now the parties, the state of Tennessee, by and through the District Attorney General's office and the defendant Zachary Adams, to make the following stipulations of fact for trial in the above matter without the necessity of proof herein. Number one, that the chart notes and dental radiograph provided to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation by Keith Taylor, DDS oral surgeon, are those of Holly Bobo from a consultation on July 8, 2008, and that the subsequent extraction of a tooth on October 15, 2008. Number two, that Dr. Holly Manus, a forensic odontologist, compared the dental records of Holly Bobo provided by Dr. Keith Taylor to the dental remains found in a wooded area in Decatur County, Tennessee, and concluded with a reasonable amount of dental certainty that the records of Holly Bobo are the records of the same individual whose remains were found in Decatur County, Tennessee on September 8 and 9, 2014. It's signed by attorneys for the respective parties. When the parties have stipulated to a particular fact, the jury is to accept that stipulation as being proved. Okay? So that will be filed as Exhibit 175. Okay, back on number. Call your name.
Your Honor, if we could have a very brief recess to our next witness got here just recently.
Okay.
Speak with her for just a few minutes and.
We're running good, folks. I'll say that to both sides, and I appreciate that. You folks know how I am, so it puts me in a much better mood. We're going to take about 15 minutes. This will be our last recess, and probably we will even conclude a little early today. Follow the admonitions I gave you at the outset. 15 minutes. Call your next.
They call us Crystal Rodriguez.
Crystal Rodriguez. Come on up, raise your right hand, please. Solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
I want you to state your name and spell first and last names for the benefit of the court reporter, please.
Okay. Crystal Rodriguez, KrystleRodriguez,
Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. What do you do for a living?
I'm a senior forensic analyst at the UNT Center for Human ID.
Did you say the UNT?
Yes.
What is UNT Center?
University of North Texas,
Okay. And where is that? Is that in the Dallas area or
Fort Worth, Texas.
Fort Worth, Texas? What kind of education do you have to become a senior forensic analyst?
I obtained a bachelor's degree in biology at Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania. And then I continued my education to get a master's degree from UNT's Health Science Center in Fort Worth in forensic genetics.
Do you have a continuing education that you
Yes.
go through to maintain, or do you have any certifications or things of that nature?
I underwent competency testing, and then I'm twice a year proficiency tested from an outside organization, and I've passed every time.
Have you done a number of tests or DNA analysis?
Yes, I've done testing on hundreds to thousands of cases.
And have you testified before as an expert in DNA analysis?
Yes.
You know, we would tender Mr. Rodriguez as an expert in DNA analysis.
No objection.
Stipulate, or you want to voir dire?
No objection.
All right, she stipulated as an expert in her field.
Thank you, Judge. And I have you did some analysis of what in this case, if you could tell the jury.
Sure. Our lab received 3 family reference samples for this case. We have one sample from Karen Bobo, the mother of missing person Holly Bobo, Dana Bobo, the father of missing person Holly Bobo, and Clint Bobo, the sibling of Holly Bobo.
Did you receive those samples sometime in 2011?
Yes, sir. May 10th, 2011.
What did you do with those samples?
We conducted DNA testing on those samples, received profiles for each of the family members, and those
May
were
10th, 2015?
2011.
11.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. And those DNA profiles were entered into CODIS, which stands for Combined DNA Indexing System. That's a national database where all the DNA profiles are entered for relatives of missing persons, and those profiles are continually searched against unidentified remain profiles that are in there also.
So they're put in that database, and then if some other profile comes in that matches as a sibling of Clint or a child of Dana or Karen, it'll
Yes,
do
sir.
what?
Our lab would be notified of the association.
But if you get another sample, a known sample, what do you do with that?
We conduct DNA testing on all the samples that are submitted to us.
And in this case, did you receive a rib sample from the West Tennessee Forensic Center in Memphis, Tennessee?
Yes, on February 5th, 2015.
And what did you do with it?
So we conducted DNA testing on that. Our lab does two different types of DNA testing. So I'll go into the nuclear DNA testing, which everybody's mostly familiar with. Your DNA is inherited half from your mother, half from your father. And for the most part, it's the blueprint of the human body. So for the most part, it's the same between all of us. That's why we have 2 legs, two arms, and a nose. But then there's also areas of that DNA that's different between individuals, and that's what our testing looks at. The only thing is, identical twins would have the same DNA profile. So we conduct that testing. And then there's also something called mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondria is an organelle within your cells that produce energy. And so it houses its own genome, but it's passed down from mother to child as a unit. So it would be the same throughout a whole maternal lineage. So for example, I share the same mitochondrial DNA profile as my mother, and my kids have the same one as me.
So that wouldn't be unique to the father, strictly the mother to the child?
Yes.
Okay.
And so we standardly conduct both testing on all our missing persons cases. So Karen Bobo, nuclear DNA testing was conducted on her sample and mitochondrial. Dana and Clint both only had nuclear DNA ran on their samples. But then all of the remains that come into our lab, we do both types of testing on them, the nuclear DNA and the mitochondrial DNA. And in this case, that was done on the rib that we received in 2015.
How do you go about getting DNA from a rib?
So the first thing we do when we receive evidence is we examine it. We check for seals, check the integrity, we take pictures of it, document everything, and then we cut the bone into small pieces. And then those pieces are then ground into bone powder. We add our reagents to that bone powder, and that bursts open the cells, releasing the DNA into basically a liquid form. We then subject that DNA extract to commercially available kits, which look at the 15 regions of the DNA that I was talking about differ between each of us. And then we also conduct the mitochondrial DNA testing on that same DNA extract. And then we have our DNA profiles.
Were you able to obtain a DNA profile from the rib that was sent to you from the West Tennessee Forensic Center?
Yes, it wasn't a complete profile, but it was mostly complete.
And what did you do with that profile?
We entered it into CODIS, and there was an association with the family reference samples that were submitted back in 2011 that had been in CODIS since 2011.
What does that mean in layman's terms?
That there is an association, so those, out of all the cases that were in CODIS, these ones married up.
So the DNA profile from the rib is a sibling of Clint Bobo?
Yes, essentially that's what it is. So the family references are in CODIS, and they're kind of like a puzzle with a missing piece. And so the DNA profile from this rib is basically the missing piece. It completed the pedigree.
So this rib is a daughter of Karen, based on the mitochondrial DNA that you...
Right. When I looked at the profiles, it is consistent with these remains belonging to a child of Karen and Dana Bobo and a sibling to Clint Bobo.
Okay. So if there were no other family member other than Holly Bobo, then the sample, that rib sample you got, the DNA profile you got, would be that of Holly Bobo.
I have a statistic for how strong that association would be.
Okay.
So the statistical calculation that I did, it's called a likelihood ratio. And so in this, you're weighing two different situations. The first situation being that these remains are from a child of Karen and Dana Bobo. The other scenario is that it's just a random person from the population. And so this is all based on frequencies in the population of DNA profiles. And so when we did the comparison, anything greater than 1 is showing that it's more likely that it's a child of Karen and Dana Bobo versus it being a random person. So the larger that number gets from 1, the more strong the association is. And when I ran the statistic in this case, it was 21.8 billion times more likely that this is a child of Karen Bobo and Dana Bobo, and also a sibling of Clint, as opposed to the identified remains being a random person from the Caucasian population.
I'm going to pass forward one document and ask you if you recognize it. Okay. If I could approach that. You recognize that document?
Yes, this is my report.
Okay. Now, if we could have that numbered as the next numbered exhibit.
175.
176.
Book 75 is a stipulation.
Oh, okay. I didn't write it down. Thank you.
Mr. Rodriguez, do you remember what date you got the rib?
Let me, it's on my report. February 5th, 2015.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Sure.
Rodriguez. No further questions, please.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, step down. I understand that the next witness we expect will be quite lengthy. I think the defendant probably agrees with that, do you not?
The next witness is going to be lengthy?
Yes.
I don't know who it is.
You want to tell who it is?
TDI agent Brent Booth.
Yes.
They kind of indicated, so we were looking, and they know me, and they didn't want to spring something on me, okay? But I don't want to start and not be able to go. I want you to have adequate time. I want you to have adequate time. And so I think it's fair that we recess. We're 3 days into a trial. This is work that you're not used to doing, okay? And I will promise you that you're more fatigued and it's more stressful than you really already know. So we're going to be breaking early today. We actually are in good shape on our time frame. I don't see anything that's going to go beyond our original expectations. I'm hoping that we'll be able to shorten it a little bit. My best advice is probably impossible, but try as best you can to put this matter out of your mind tonight. Get a good night's rest. Tomorrow could be a long day. You know, today's a short day, tomorrow could be a long day. We get to certain places and we have to anticipate the length of witnesses to determine how we're going to do. But I suspect tomorrow will be probably a lengthy day, so you need a good night's rest. Those admonitions, front page of your book, look at those periodically. But basically, those are rules to assure the parties of a fair trial. Keep an open mind. Don't form or express any opinion. Do not discuss the case with anyone, not even with your fellow jurors, until the case is submitted to you for your final consideration. Do not allow the case to be discussed in your presence. Once again, ignore any news reports. There shouldn't be any available to you because we're not giving you TVs or anything. Avoid conversations with parties, witnesses, or attorneys, and report promptly to court any violation of the rules. Or if you think that something is just not quite right, please let me know through a court officer, because part of my job is to ensure all sides of this is a fair trial. Do you have any questions prior to release for the evening? Well, this ought to give you time for a good evening meal, and like I say, you folks are going to be tireder than you think. I still go to bed real early, but I'm waking up even earlier now. So I'm sure, like I say, and it's try as best you can to put it out of your mind. I know that's impossible. It's like don't think of elephants for the next 10 seconds was the first thing. But try as best you can to do that, okay? Any questions at all? All right. Let's let our jury exit.